Don't talk to me about what I should think about cars.
I completely agree.
Boost, Booze, and Barbecue.
Hello and welcome to another Boost, Booze, and Barbecue. This is Andy, and taking second chair is Mike Jokum of Pitlane Parley. Mike, thanks so much for being here. I love the name. How did you guys come up with that?
You know, what's funny is parlay with an E also has a second meaning to battle in a dispute, which is, often happens on pit lane or in a race, obviously the podcast in INDYCAR. So, kind of has a cool double meaning that I like. And I owe the name of the show to my co-host, Jess. I don't remember how we settled on it, but I know it was her that came up with it.
That's fun, though. I like that. The implication of battle. It's a little bit old-timey. It's a little bit like pulling the glove off and slapping the other guy across the face with it. Except for instead of gloves, it's, my tire flew off and hit you in the top of the head.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, this is Boost, Booze, and Barbecue, and we do run a little bit different format than you do. So we're going to get started off with the booze. What do you have on your end, my friend?
I have a Decadent Ales Toasted Marshmallow IPA. It is, as I told you before we hit record, it's interesting. It's not as marshmallowy as you would hope. It doesn't have as much flavor as I was hoping when I picked it out at the store last week, but it's easy to drink.
A toasted marshmallow IPA, that really throws me off because typically your IPA is going to be more bitter. It can have some sweetness to it, but it's definitely something that's going to be balanced out with the floral notes. But usually it's like a fruit. A fruit IPA is pretty common. Right. And so I'm sitting here thinking,
This says in the bottom, and I honestly hadn't read it until I looked at it because it's in bright pink letters. The can is very cool, by the way. The can design is awesome. It says IPA brewed with turbinado. I don't even know what that is. Coconut, muscovado sugars. Again, I don't know what that is. And Madagascar vanilla bean. So it's very interesting, and it's not a bad beer. It just doesn't live up to what I was hoping it would be.
Gotcha. Turbinado is the sugar in the raw, by the way.
I knew that. I was just making sure you did.
Yeah. Did I win?
You did. You won a beer.
You know what? I think today I'll stick with my brandy. On my end of the spectrum, I am sipping on a Vivacity Spirits 2-year aged Trails brandy, and it is absolutely amazing.
Sounds fantastic.
We'll have photos and links, of course, up to both of these amazing drinks. Thank you to Vivacity for supplying this one, and thank you, Mike, for supplying your own.
That's what I'm here for.
All right, so Pitlane Parley. It is anything and everything about INDYCAR. Is that correct?
Yes. So a little background. After guest hosting on a show called Indy Sports Car Podcast last year, I am one who always wants to do things my way, and I thought, let me branch out on my own here. And we started it with one co-host, my co-host Jess, that I mentioned, that came up with the name. We've already had another co-host, Matt. We have great chemistry to the point where you wouldn't know that. I've never met Matt in person before, and until the season started this year back in March, I hadn't met Jess for the first 5 months we did the show. But we do everything INDYCAR, interviews. We have a great interview with 2 rookie drivers coming up tomorrow night. We had series champion Joseph Newgarden on back in January. Jay Fry, the president of INDYCAR, competition on right after the season started, I believe. Mike Hull, the famous guy behind Chip Ganassi Racing, their managing director on, just to name a few of the highlights that we've had in our first year.
Oh, so you're still in your first year with this?
Yes, we started in early December of 2017.
And look at where you are now. I mean, I'm very impressed with that. You guys you found a niche. You're creating fantastic content. Might I just say, when I caught your episode with Santino Ferrucci and your Portland recap, I was very appreciative to hear that because, as you know, it was the first year that we had Indy back in Portland in, I don't remember how many years. Same with the Pirelli World Challenge. That was their first time back in, I think it was like 12 or 15 years. I'm losing it off the top of my head, but it's something like that, you know, and seeing these motorsports come back to Oregon, it just warms my heart.
Yeah, that's a race that I was really disappointed I couldn't make in person this year. It wasn't that long ago, and I don't remember what I was doing. I think I had a wedding that weekend. But you bring up Santino Ferrucci, and if I may, he caught himself in a lot of hot water probably about 4 or 5 months ago over in Europe, racing in the Formula 2 series. Jess and I met him on pit lane, ironically, before the race in St. Louis in August. We talked to him. I was blown away at how humble he was for a 20-year-old kid, and how well spoken he was. And
yeah, gosh, people forget that he's only 20 years old.
Yeah. And I thought, this isn't the same guy that I've seen portrayed in the news for the last couple of months. And I was very critical of his comments in Europe back in June, and I won't get into that. But so we said, listen, do you want to be on the show? We'd love to have you. And obviously, as you mentioned, we had him on. And I mean, he was a great guest. And yes, there were people who tweeted at us, oh, he's a scumbag, et cetera, et cetera. But a lot of people messaged me or texted me or whatever, tweeted at us and said, wow, it was very interesting to hear him just kind of talk about that. He's actually not a bad guy. And listen, when you and I were both 20 years old, we probably said some really stupid things. I can guarantee I did. And I learned and matured, even if my wife might disagree with that part. So I think everybody deserves a second chance. And actually, it was just announced about 4 hours ago that he got a full season ride for 2019. So, props to him for overcoming adversity this year.
Well, here's the thing. How do I say this in a politically correct way? As much as we want to think people have some type of prejudice, the fact of the matter is money rules all. And he's a great driver. He's a really good driver. And there's money to be made there.
He was impressive considering, he had very little practice leading up to his last 2 races of the year and finished 11th of the last race of the year in Sonoma, California. And, 11th out of 25 cars with little experience. I mean, that's a great effort. He beat some veteran drivers and a couple other rookies. And, listen, I'm impressed with his demeanor. I think he's come a long way, and I know he feels bad about what happened in June. And, listen, we don't discuss it on the episode. We're trying to portray him in a positive way and kind of help him move forward. And I think it did that.
I think you did too. You didn't bring it up. You let him say what he wanted to say, and exactly. People get to make their own choices and opinions. And, that's the way it should be. You can't dictate the way a person should feel, and they shouldn't let themselves be open to that type of suggestion. And after your talk with him, it reminded you that you were talking about a person, and not just a person, but a person who's quite a bit younger. And it's exactly like you said. I mean, not even old enough to go into an American bar.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. And when Jess and I talked to him before the race, standing on pit lane, and we said, how difficult is it with Twitter? I mean, Twitter is a pretty rough place. It's honestly our biggest social media following for the podcast is Twitter, but Twitter in general is, it's pretty rough. I don't think it's as rough as Facebook or Reddit or some of these other social medias, but he told us that, and he had a very painful look on his face when he was telling us how difficult it is to deal with some of the things being said about him and some of the things I've seen said about him. And you feel bad because, like you said, the kid's 20 years old. If people said that about me when I was 20 years old, I'm sure I would have reacted the same way, or probably worse than he reacted.
Yeah, it probably would have been worse for me too. Now, granted, I'm not driving someone else's millions of dollars race car, but sense comes with age, and he has a natural born talent, and he obviously has a will to do well and a drive, and he's striving, but that striving to be at the top of his game in motorsport is not the same as striving to be at the top of his game on a personal level. It's very different.
Exactly.
All right, we got kind of off in the weeds here because you're not just talking to drivers about their younger selves' personal issues. You're also going into great detail of everything INDYCAR. You know, I was listening to your latest episode and you were talking about one of the mergers that's coming up. And I like hearing that sort of thing. It is the grotesque detail that you guys go into, and the fact that you can just pull it right out of the back of your brains with seemingly little effort. And I don't know if I should be congratulating you or your editor, but it's very entertaining to listen to.
Probably both. So, you know, obviously Jess, Matt, and I do plenty of research and have our show notes available, but our show notes are very bulleted, you know, talk about this, mention this, blah, blah, blah. But all three of us, you know, we pretty much live and breathe INDYCAR, even all off season. And I like to explain things, you know, like this, you know, the Harding Racing and Steinbrenner Racing merger that you're alluding to.
Yes.
In a way that, you know, somebody like me who's a longtime INDYCAR fan can understand, or somebody, you know, like a college buddy of mine whose house I was at yesterday who doesn't know anything about INDYCAR, never watched a race before, just saw on social media that I was doing a podcast and texted me a couple weeks ago and said, I'm going to listen. And he said, it was really cool. He said, I didn't really know what you were talking about in terms of the races, but I really like the way you explain everything. So no matter if you've known racing your entire life or for a few weeks, you can pick up on a few things and start to become interested. I got my wife to go to a race this year, which was to me a miracle. So, you know, it helped.
That's huge. That is really huge. I got my wife to start doing a podcast with me in kind of a similar fashion. So I'm with you. I get it.
Yeah. You know, when I started the podcast, she was super about it. And as it got more bigger and bigger, not to sound cocky, but as we started becoming more successful and I was heading up to Toronto for the weekend, she said, I heard how much you love Toronto. How about I come? So we got to explore Toronto, which is an amazing city, and watch a great race. And, you know, she got a viewpoint that the average fan doesn't get standing. You know, we were standing down in turn one, actually, where the flaggers stand. So, you know, she got a cool viewpoint and, you know, cool experiences all weekend, meeting different people, important people that I have become friends with. So it was really cool to get her into that after, you know, dating for almost 10 years and her not even wanting to watch it on TV. Now she's interested.
Yeah, nice. Hey, it's good that she's interested now because you're on a nationally syndicated radio station.
Yes. Shout out to wildfireradio.com. The guys in Wildfire who are local to me here in Philly have an awesome new studio that just opened today, actually, Monday. And I haven't been there yet, but it looks fantastic. And all the Wildfire guys are super friendly when I have issues or if I need help with a track trying to slow me down on credentials. They're super cool. There's all sorts of comedy shows and sports shows and cooking shows and some blogs. There's actually an INDYCAR blog on there. A guy by the name of Mike Silver and Rebecca. I forget Rebecca's last name now that we're talking, but she's from the St. Louis, Indianapolis area because I met her in St. Louis. Nonetheless, there's lots of cool things going on there, and you'll probably see them at a podcast trade show at some point. They
awesome.
were at Podcast Movement this summer in Philly. My show airs on Fridays from 3:15 to 4:15 p.m. Eastern time, and then obviously it's available on all the podcast apps, but on Wildfire, it is live 3:15 to 4:15 Eastern time.
Well, Mike, I wanted to bring it back around to Portland because one of the things that I've been wondering lately, and I'm sure other people have been wondering it as well, is what the consensus seems to be about Portland International Raceway, because it's been out of the circuit for whatever it's been now, 10 or 15 years. And was there much of a feel that you were getting off of the drivers or the spectators about it?
The hype pre and during the weekend and after the weekend was fantastic. You know, I, like most people, didn't really know what to expect going into the race. Obviously, you know, with the new aero kit on the cars this year, how would it perform? You know, it wasn't particularly a super fascinating race. Last time an open wheel car was there 10 or 12 years ago or so. But the race itself, was awesome. The crowd was fantastic. I think there were close to 50,000 people there. And it's definitely going to be back for at least 2 more years.
Now, why do you say at least 2 more years? Is there some metric that you're going off of?
So I believe they signed a 3-year contract before this past season started. And I would imagine after a stellar first year, they are probably already talking about a contract extension of sorts. I haven't heard anything one way or the other, but I know it's definitely on the schedule for 3 years, no matter how good or bad the weekend is. But I would imagine the crowd was great, the racing was great, the whole weekend was fantastic weather-wise too, which is obviously plays a big factor in how excited the crowd is. That you'll probably see Portland on the schedule for more than just the next couple years.
I sure hope so, because we crave it here. We haven't had a lot of the big brand, big name motorsports coming to Oregon lately, and there's a thirst for it. There's a need for it. It's the perfect example that I can come up with is when Subaru brought the WRX over, and they were just like, these Americans, they're not going to know what to do with this thing. Nobody's going to want it. And then, of course, they sold like hotcakes, and they're everywhere. And it's the same way with the STI and the Evo. Like, these manufacturers were just sitting with their arms crossed thinking, the Americans don't want to have anything to do with those. And then they brought them over, and they just sold like hotcakes. The exact same thing is happening with racing at PIR.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. The Pacific Northwest is a market that INDYCAR definitely needed to get back to. From everything I've read, the race, back probably when I was a much younger fan, was always well attended, and it trailed off in the last couple of years. But the desire had come back. Portland, the track president, I forget his name right now, really wanted INDYCAR back, and INDYCAR made it work. And I think it was a great fit that you're going to see on the schedule for many years. And I'm very happy they came back, and it will be. So this year I was not there in person, but next year I most certainly will be there.
Well, if you do end up making it, make sure that you give us a shout. We'll have you come by the studio and hang out for a bit, and I'll cook up some ribs, and we'll have a good time. I'll get you some Oregon beers, okay?
I love it.
Now, I haven't really been able to check out the results from that. However, the final turn at PIR, a lot of people end up having trouble with that. And I'm not sure if anyone ended up going off bad enough to do damage to their vehicle, but that's actually fairly common. Races have been won and lost because you'd go in just a little bit too hot on that decreasing radius corner.
Yep.
And you end up running off without even realizing what happened. You've been running 9 3/4 out of 10 the entire race, and it's a knife's edge right there, and people don't realize it. It's got a little bit of weird camber. It's a little bit decreasing radius, and it catches a lot of people. I've watched Spec Miatas go off there.
Yeah, actually, Will Power was suffering from some sort of gearbox failure, and in process of being slightly distracted, did go off into that last tire wall, and I think he was able to limp back to pit lane, but that did end his race.
That's where a lot of the action happens. When you do come out and watch the race, you're going to notice that a lot of the photographers park themselves over by that corner, and also by the chicane, because the chicane is another one. If the chicane is in use, it gets people every single time. There's always some kind of a twist up right there. There's always somebody off at that very last corner. Like that's the Portland International Raceway signature. If you've got cars that are wrecking in those two places, then that's an average race weekend.
Yeah, there was the first lap or the second lap? It was the first lap of the race. There was all sorts of mayhem in the chicane in that first area, and Marco Andretti ended up upside down. Scott Dixon ended up in the mud. 3 or 4 cars ended up out of the race before we got too far, and that was a while. Santino Ferrucci snuck through that kind of offshoot area to sneak through, and I'm trying to think of who it was. I think Graham Rahal's weekend finished off on a rough start or a rough end there, and probably a couple other cars that I can't even remember at this point, but it was a mayhem of a first lap.
It's tricky. It's a tricky track. Can you think of any other tracks in the series that are sort of like that, where drivers come into it expecting one thing, and then they have a very different expectation as they're leaving?
I'll give you two examples. I'll go one oval and one street and road course. Pocono Raceway, obviously its nickname is the Tricky Triangle. Each turn is modeled after a different racetrack, and I'm going to pull up on my computer the results of that. But Pocono Raceway, its turns are modeled after. Let me see here. I believe one of them is Trenton Speedway that no longer exists. The other is Indianapolis, and the third one is the Milwaukee Mile. Okay, here we go. So I pulled it up for everybody wondering what I'm talking about. Turn 1 is 14 degrees of banking modeled after Trenton Speedway. Turn 2 is 9 degrees of banking modeled after Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And then turn 3 is 6 degrees of banking modeled after the Milwaukee Mile. So it's very difficult to find any sort of setup for your car that works in all three corners, because all three corners are wildly different. So you see a lot of guys spin and crash in turn 1, turn 3 as well, because the banking is so much less than turn 1 and turn 2 that it's, you're playing with your in-car instruments more so than other ovals, and you can get distracted. And obviously this year Pocono was a bit of an unfortunate race with Robert Wickens' accident, but it's still it's a tricky, no pun intended, it's a tricky place. In terms of a road or street course that is tricky, I am going to pull up the schedule here so I can remember where they were at this point. Barber Motorsports Park down in Alabama, the natural road course, is a beautiful place, pretty tricky with its changing elevations. And then, Road America up in Wisconsin, it's the longest course on the INDYCAR schedule. I think it's just over 4 miles. Huge elevation changes, sweeping straightaways, super tight corners. It's got a little bit of everything, and it's tough to really nail setup there as well. What I saw this year, and there was a guy who at the beginning of the INDYCAR season was charting speeds by corner, by driver, which was really fascinating to me, and somebody who's interested in the data behind racing. And guys at Road America were either setting up for straightaway speed or corner speed. It didn't seem like anybody outside of the amazing Scott Dixon and maybe Will Power, that anybody was geared up to have fast cornering or was able to corner fast and drive the straightaways fast. His name was Mike something. Now, of course, now that we're talking about it, I don't remember what his Twitter is.
Your near encyclopedic knowledge of all things IndyCar is failing you right now.
I know. At least people's names, but that's nothing new. I didn't see him on social media the second half of the season, actually, so maybe that's probably why I forget his name. But it was fascinating to see, kind of guess at what guys were doing for setups just based on his data. I mean, you could tell a guy like Ed Jones was running quote unquote slow on the straightaways and only worried about his cornering speed because it was blue on the straightaways and the data was red in the corners. And then other guys were the complete opposite. And then obviously, like I said, you had the marvels of Scott Dixon and Will Power and maybe a couple other guys who put it together everywhere. But that was maybe 2 out of 23 guys.
That's incredible that it would be so difficult for so many seasoned drivers, but you just have the few that can kind of look at it and get it.
Yeah, I mean, there are some guys, I'm trying to think of who it was. There was a couple, veterans that just, they struggle at certain courses no matter how many times they try there, because these courses are so wildly different week in and week out. And, sometimes you just guess wrong on the setup, and when you adjust, it's so finite that you just mess up a little bit and it screws everything up.
Well, and speaking of racing a different track every single weekend, that's something that I kind of like seeing is when they're touring these big trailers, and they're going through and they're kind of doing, it is a tour. It's sort of like a MTV Cribs, but for big race rigs, right? And inevitably you end up seeing a PlayStation 4 or a computer with a wheel and a little wireless keyboard, because man, as soon as they're done with that one race, they need to start practicing even in a simulation for the next one. Any little advantage that they can get over the next weekend is going to be as important as anything else they could do that week.
Yeah, there's a lot of guys, especially I would say the younger drivers, but even some of the more veteran guys are big into the simulators. There are a few drivers that are very against the simulator. I know Danica Patrick is one that has gone on record and said that she doesn't see the benefit in a simulator. But then there are guys, Sage Karam, for one, is on iRacing pretty much every night. And I generally don't log on to iRacing anymore because I don't have the time. But I have raced against him, and he whooped my butt. And I'm okay with that, because I would hope Sage Karam whoops my butt at a simulation racing.
I would sure hope so, too, because if you beat him and then you're sitting here going, what have I done with my life?
Right. That's a really funny story, and not to get completely sidetracked, but there's a fantastic simulation training facility in Indianapolis called Racecraft One, run by a great gentleman by the name of Kelly Jones. I'll be doing a live show out there in December. Anyway, Kelly has had the likes of James Hinchcliffe, Joseph Newgarden, etc. train at his facility before. And he's got some amazing simulators, and younger drivers come in there all the time to practice, and before they travel. Actually, a friend of mine who's trying to break into the Road to Indy ladder series, and also NASCAR Trucks, Christian Alexo works there. Training some guys who pay some money to test it out and have some fun. And I raced against Christian when I was out in Indianapolis for the Indy 500, and I did out-qualify him at Phoenix one race, and I think I did finish better than him. Wow. And I made sure to give Christian a hard time the entire 2 weeks I was out there, because Christian does this for a living, and I don't. So I'm sure as soon as he listens to this, he's going to give me a hard time. But I mean, Christian's one of my good friends, so it's all in good spirits that I say that. But it was nice to at least out-qualify somebody who is much better at this than I am.
Oh, I feel exactly the same way. And in my opinion, if you're going to be an automotive journalist, and, we can split hairs a little bit, but what you do every single week is you do the research, you talk to the players, you put together your content, and then you put it out there every week. That makes you a journalist, whether you want to be called a journalist or not. But
that's fair.
Any automotive journalist needs to be able to handle themselves in a car. If you're just totally ham-fisted and you can't get around an autocross course without taking out all of the cones, don't talk to me about what I should think about cars.
I completely agree. I couldn't have said it better myself.
I appreciate that. Now, being a ham-fisted person myself, at least I have the good sense to, let people know, hey, you're working that corner, you may want to just step back a little bit.
Yep. I mean, I try to give some people some pointers. Listen, it's been months since I haven't logged on to iRacing since I raced against Christian. That was back in May. But, I always tried to give guys some pointers, and I'm like, well, what do you know? Well, I do kind of watch every minute of every practice of every race of every season for the last, listen, give or take a few races in college that I might have missed because I didn't wake up in time, the last 31 years. But, it's okay.
Do you do any real life racing, or have you in the past, or is that something that you're looking to start doing again?
I have done a little bit of go-karting, and by a little bit, I mean a little bit. And listen, I love go-karting. It's a lot of fun, and I'll definitely do that again. I did a little bit at Sarah Fisher's go-kart track in Indianapolis, which is right on Main Street down from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And let me tell you, that place is awesome. They have an oval, which is, again, I raced against Christian and another guy who raced in the lower rungs of the Road to Indy, Mackay Stevens. and they lapped me more times than I care to remember, to the point where my arms were so tired on the oval, I kind of hung out on the outside lane and let them pass underneath me, part because they were having a great battle, and part because I was exhausted. It gave me a really great appreciation for how much fitness goes into being an actual race car driver. But the road course, I did pretty well. I didn't beat Mackay. I don't think Christian did the road course. I didn't beat Mackay by any means, but I actually started 30 seconds late due to they couldn't get my go-kart started for whatever reason, and I still finished in second place. So I was pretty proud of that. My ribs hurt a lot the next day from, bumping into walls and driving my butt off. But, I do love go-karting. It's a lot of fun. There's a half-decent go-kart track not far from me here, about 45 minutes north of Philly or so. So I'll probably continue that a handful of times a year. I did the outdoor track that was in the infield at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway this year, but only one race, and there was, I think, one or two other people on the day I went. So it wasn't it was cool. I love, anytime I can do anything like that. I did some go-karting down in Nashville. Oh boy, 2 years ago, it was my bachelor party, and you can imagine bachelor party and go-karting don't really mix because of everything else that's going on. Mm-hmm. The amount of, I guess I can say it on this show because we're talking about alcohol. The amount of beers that I drank and then went go-karting the next morning, and I think the amount of tequila I had in me too. After 2 races in 100-degree heat, I was spent.
Ooh, more than spent. I'd be ruining my helmet.
I did feel pretty dizzy. I did not get sick, but I do remember feeling. I think I downed like 3 Gatorades after that, waiting for our Uber.
Oh yeah, that helps.
Yeah, I mean that's probably the only reason I was able to make it out that night.
Yeah, electrolytes is what plants crave. Well, we have a really nice little indoor go-kart track here, and I always feel like whenever we talk about go-karts, I need to, tell people this caveat of like, it's not the go-karts where you think, oh, it's the go-kart with the 3 horsepower motor on the back and it just kind of tools around this little parking lot track or whatever. Like when you go to these actual go-kart tracks, this is where the guys that race carts all summer go in the winter, because they're real actual carts. Like the gas tank is in between your legs, the engine's off to your right hand side, your ribs are bruised because you're pulling so many G's in the corners. Like it's a whole real thing. We went there a couple of years ago for my birthday. I'm not a big birthday person. I don't like doing big stuff for my birthday, but sometimes I will use it as an excuse to just get the friends together, But we're all racers, and we've all been racing for years. And I have let it go a little bit. Some of my friends have not. As a matter of fact, one of my friends just won Street Modified
nice.
In Topeka, Kansas.
Oh, wow, that's awesome.
Wherever it was, they were doing the pro solos.
Yep.
Yeah, it was Topeka this year, wasn't it?
I believe so. Don't quote me on that, but I believe you're correct.
Well, wherever it was raining super bad. And I remember the photos that he posted. It looked like it was just, they were racing across the top of a lake. But anyways, no matter. He's an incredible driver. He creates products for Evos. We'll give him a little shout out. I'll put a link on the website. But won first place in Street Modified. So that's kind of the type of people that I roll with. Anyways, none of us had been drinking, but we are all ultra competitive, and we ended up with I think 15 carts on a track that was taking about 30 seconds to get around. And so it was pandemonium, and one of the carts ended up on top of somebody's legs. And they were okay, a little scraped up, but
sure.
That ended our race day.
Yeah, go-karting at the place in Indy is very similar to that. It's super intense. You get a lot of the Road to Indy drivers are there all the time. The place near my house, probably not that intense. But, I mean, listen, it's still fun. Any chance I can get out there, I can. It's been a while. I actually was trying to get a day job event at the go-kart track, and my boss shut me down. Thankfully, he won't be listening to this. And pretty soon my podcast will be my day job, I hope. Hope in the near future. So I don't have to say my boss, because then I'll be the boss, right?
That's right.
But I got shut down because it wasn't conducive to a working atmosphere. I don't know what he's talking about. I think it's a perfect place to go do some work and let out your frustrations of a long day racing, but I don't make the decisions there.
It's funny you say that about the go-karting and the boss, because do you know who Tom O'Gorman is?
It sounds familiar, but I'm not sure.
He's a rookie. He is racing with real-time racing in the Parley World Challenge. We were fortunate enough to have him on the show when we went around and we're talking to people in the pits there at the Parley World Challenge. And he was very, very generous with his time, and we really appreciated talking to him. But it's something that I noticed just the other day. We became friends on Facebook, and so, we like and comment once in a while on stuff. And I noticed that it said previous place he worked was some kind of an indoor go-kart track. And I just thought, oh, that makes sense.
Man, I would love to get a part-time job at a go-kart track, but between my day job and the podcast and, being home with my wife, there's not really too much time to spare anymore. So I have to make some sacrifices somewhere.
All right. Well, all this racing is bringing me around to our smoking dealer, Smoking a Doob. Now, you have one and I have one, but since we're talking about racing, I'm going to go ahead and lead in with mine. Have you heard of the Gambler 500? You're going to know exactly what it is when you look it up. It originated in Oregon, but it's happening all over the United States now. It went completely viral here.
Oh, yeah. I know what you're talking about.
So one of the things that I really love to do is after the Oregon Gambler race, I get on Craigslist and I just put in Gambler and I see what kinds of cars have been coming up. And I have to admit, I've missed out on a few that would have been perfect for Smoking Dealer, Smoking a Doob. But this one fits the bill pretty darn close. This is a 1984 Pontiac Fiero.
Ooh.
They want $1,500 for it, 1500. Now, keeping in mind, this is for a race that's supposed to be with $500 cars.
Right.
So you're selling a car for a $500 car race for $1,500. I'm throwing out that irony. You can do whatever you want with it. I'm just saying. No bumper, no fenders, no rear bumper. It is, however, a manual transmission. It's a 4-speed. It says on the ad that it's an automatic, but it's not. It's a 4-speed. And I have to admit, I would probably drive this thing every day. I don't think it would start every day, but I would probably try to drive it every day. What do you think about it? You've got it up there, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's pretty ugly.
Well, let's be real. Fieros were ugly when they were new.
Good point. I don't like the sticker that says the sticker adds 5 horsepower. It's cheesy. And the no bumper thing, I mean, I get it, but the ad itself says automatic transmission and then it says 4-speed. It's now a Gambler 500 finisher, which is ironic because he wants to sell it for more than $500, which I also don't understand. Yeah, I think you've got an interesting find on your hand.
I'll tell you what, buddy. I don't know what exactly 500 off-road miles in a Fiero does to the value, but I don't think it increases it.
I wouldn't think so. Just my opinion. I wouldn't think so.
I just love that it says finisher. It's like, yes, we finished the race. That's great. And I do appreciate hearing and seeing that. But yet again, that means you covered 500 miles off road. And that is a lot of wear and tear.
Yeah. Holy shit.
All right. And you've got a really good one for us too. What do you have over there?
The 1998 GMC C8500. I'm just going to skip the rest of this title because it's long. Service truck. One of those service trucks to see on the side of the highway with the big electric sign that says, lane closed or whatever. The board itself costs around $15,000 apparently if it's new. But this truck has 165,000 miles on it, and they still want nearly $20,000 for it, which is insane. I mean, listen, it's probably a workhorse of a truck, sure, but unless you're another state and some sort of municipality, nobody's going to buy your truck. And none of these state run automotive departments are probably looking for trucks on Craigslist. So poor placement, I guess. I mean, if you put this on eBay Motors, it's probably, listen, there has to be some sort of, state resale type website that states are approved to buy from other states, I would imagine. So I don't care that this diesel engine is only one owner because it's got 165,000 miles. It's 20 years old, and it's got a not new digital signboard, which is, I guess, kind of cool. But unless you've got a ton of money to spare, or you are a bored state worker surfing Craigslist at work when you shouldn't be, I don't think anybody's going to see this.
All right, so let me ask you this. At what price does this become a cool truck where you would go, I could see myself doing something with that?
If I was single, probably like $1,000, because I can't see any need for a truck like that. But at $1,000 and a cool sign, I would drive it to the IndyCar races I go to and put the podcast information on there and leave it in the parking lot all weekend. Sure, I could get some value out of that.
It would flash up pitlaneparley.com, and it would also flash "You Suck, Lewis Hamilton," and just alternate back and forth.
Yeah, boo NASCAR. But I'm pretty sure if it came home in my driveway, the next time you talk to me, I'll probably be divorced. So I think it would be immediately out of consideration if we're talking my current living situation.
Fair enough. Is the Fiero in the same boat?
It's a step up from that. If listen, since it's part of the Gambler 500, I'd spend $100 on it, so a little bit more value. But again, I have a very nice Honda Civic that if I told my wife, "Oh yeah, I bought a Fiero because it was in the Gambler 500," she'd probably look at me like I was insane. She probably wouldn't divorce me over a couple $100, but she definitely would be really angry.
Yeah. She'd say that thing's going right back on Craigslist.
Yeah. Oh, it would go immediately to the nearest used car dealer.
I don't know, maybe like a scrapyard, if I'm being honest.
You probably get more value from that.
That's right. Well, hey, Mike, we are going to put both of these up, and so make sure that you're keeping an eye out and see what people think about your truck, okay? People are going to be able to use the hashtag #SmokinDeal or the hashtag #SmokinADoob, and let us know what exactly they think about these two vehicles that we've chosen. Mike, thanks so much for being here and doing this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, man. I had a blast. Thank you for having me on. And
PitlaneParley.com is where you can find these guys. Pitlane Parley on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram. That's where they post all their social media. That's where you can find their episodes. Wildfire Radio, Fridays, 3:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or just pitlaneparley.com, as well as iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, Stitcher, anywhere else that you listen to podcasts. What else can we use to get a hold of you, Mike?
Quick shout out to the app Castbox, who featured us in their sports and recreation section for a month or so this summer. Another cool podcast app. But also my personal social media is at Mike_JOACHIM. And I'm always down for a DM to talk about racing, or if you have a suggestion for the show. I never turn away a message.
That's awesome. Look at this guy. He's all heart.
I mean, listen, part of my job is to bring more fans to the sport, or educate maybe a casual fan on something they don't know about. So there is a stupid cliche, and there is no dumb question. Certainly applies to me if you want to talk about racing.
There is no dumb question. There are only dumb people.
Yes. Well said.
Well, Mike, thank you very much. And we will talk to you soon. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And there he goes, everybody. Hey, shout out to him. That was great. Called in, did that with us. We really appreciate him doing that. And we really appreciate you guys going and checking him out. And while you're out there checking him out, don't forget to check us out. Facebook.com/BoostBoostBBQ. The Instagram is BoostBoostBBQ. Twitter, Boost Booze BBQ, the website, boostboozebbq.com. Our new show, Pardon My Fork, is out now. It can be found at boostboozebbq.com/pardonmyfork. Make sure that you're going over there, giving that a listen, giving that a like. We sure appreciate it. And the Teespring store, teespring.com/store/boostboozebbq. There's dashes in between them, but you guys will get that worked out. We got tons of cool shirts over there. Make sure you're going and checking that out. So once again, thanks so much for Mike and everyone else here at Boost, Booze, and Barbecue. This is Andy. We will see you next time.
Boost, Booze, and Barbecue.